Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are incredibly excited to have Coach Chip on the show with Coach Prusso and myself. If you guys don't follow Coach Chip on YouTube, he's one of my favorite follows, a wealth of football knowledge, a great podcast, Football Talk with Coach Chip, all kinds of information. He's also selling his GPS offense, gun power spread, which is right up my alley, has some really good stuff. He has over 40 years of coaching experience, multiple state championship teams he's been a part of. And like I said, I'm really excited to have him on the show and learn from him. Like I've already been learning from him before I even met him, in getting all sorts of information. He produces all sorts of free materials and different things. So really an honor to have him on the show. And we're going to get right into the topic. But before we get right into the topic, let me just take one moment to thank our sponsor. In these budget crunching times, fundraising is vital for our teams. I know fundraising can be a pain, but it is so important for football teams and athletic teams everywhere. If you are looking for the easiest fundraiser out there, then let me tell you about School Funder. They are the only online company in America that lets you keep all of the money that your team raises. Sound good? Too good to be true? I thought it was as well, but I can tell you firsthand, we used them last spring for our lift-a-thon, something we were going to do anyway, and we made a ton of money, just over $12,000 in, I think, about 2 weeks' time. So really, they're also super easy to work for. No more unnecessary fees. All that stuff is true that I'm telling you. Like I said, all that money we raised, we were able to keep all of it, minus the very small 3% credit card fee. With other companies, we would have to give up over $2,000 of that money that we earned. The extra money we kept with School Funder mattered, as it was used to feed the team all year, and it's still feeding us in the off season. We have guys leaving right now out of the locker room, and they're leaving with a protein bar, chocolate milk, peanut butter and jellies, all sorts of stuff. And it's because of the money we were able to raise with School Funder. So you wouldn't give up 20% of the wins your team earns, so why give up 20% of the money they earn? Teams all over Arizona and the U.S. are switching to School Funder. I highly recommend you visit schoolfunder.org. That's SCHOOLFUNDR.org. And please tell them that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it will help the show. And while you're at it, I'm going to take what Coach Chip always says at the start. Please like and subscribe. It is absolutely free. There's all kinds of resources. We have fantastic coaches on here sharing great information, including today. So take a second, like, subscribe. It helps us reach more coaches out there. So with all that said, we're going to get right into the topic at hand. And Coach Chip, I know a lot of this because like I said, I've been a big fan and listened to a lot of your podcast stuff. And I always have great respect and reverence for guys that have been in the profession as long as you and been as successful as you have been. 40 plus years in what I consider to be the greatest profession in the world, high school football coaching. So please tell us a little bit about your story.
Coach Collette, thanks so much for having me on. It's pretty cool now that I get to be interviewed and get to be the guest I just uploaded my 40th podcast this afternoon that will be out Sunday morning. And since last June, I've only missed two weekends. I missed the weekend between Christmas and New Year's, and I missed a weekend during football season because my computer crashed. So, and that's forgivable. I can't tell you my whole story, or we'd have to have 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast, but I started in 1980. Really, I started in 1981 when I graduated high school. I went to junior college for a year, and I helped coach a city team that went undefeated and unscored upon. And the offensive line and defensive line was my thing. And I knew from the time I was 14 or 15 years old that I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be a history professor because I was a history nerd from the time I was old enough to read. And I had these great coaches in high school that I thought were great guys, and they are. And they said, you can do both. And so every time we get together with some of my old high school teammates and a reunion or something, they say, "Man, it's so cool. You're the only one out of all of us that's doing exactly what you said you wanted to do," and that is kind of cool to get to do it. And the last 10 years I was actively coaching, people would say, like, "Have you ever thought about retirement?" And I said, well, "I'm just now getting decent at it. This is not an easy process." And so I coached all over the state of Alabama from 1985 when I got out of college at Troy. And that's the Troy State Trojans, not the Troy University Trojans. They changed the name, and we all fought it. All the alum fought it, and so we always say it's Troy State. And started coaching in Southeast Alabama, what we call the Wiregrass region. It's the peanut capital of the world, and stayed there for most of it. Went 3 years up to North Alabama, and as the locals up there, you said the other day that Prescott is pronounced Prescott. Well, Muscle Shoals, Alabama is pronounced Musho. Musho. If you're from there, you can always tell somebody it's not from Muscle Shoals because they call it Muscle Shoals. And of course, that was like the little Nashville, the Rolling Stones, Leonard Skinner, Aretha Franklin's Respect, all that came out of those studios in that little town in Northwest Alabama. Had 3 great years up there, went back to South Alabama, stayed there, and then ended up in Central Alabama for the last, 14 years of my career in Alabama. Jumped across the river, thought I'd get 10 in over here and get 2 retirements in Georgia, but I decided that no, I'm not going to get 10 in. So I did 2 in public school in Georgia, and then went to a private school for a year. And that's when I went back home, as I call it, Lynette, as the head coach for one more tour of duty before I had my health scare last year. And I decided, I said, 40 years is enough. We got young guys that can do this job. And I started my podcast 1 month after I retired. Been wanting to do one for 10 or 12 years. Started doing the YouTubes in 20, about a month before the pandemic. My wife walked past one day. I was watching one of the coaches that I watched on YouTube, and she said, "I recognize that guy's voice. You listen to him a lot." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "He's a pretty good coach. I learned a few things from him." She said, "Well, you ought to do one." She said, "You know as much about football as they do." And I went, "Really?" And I thought, and the truth is, she was trying to give me something to do to get me out of her hair because I was already retired from the classroom and was just coaching half days, and started doing it. And then the pandemic hit, and that's all there was to do. And so I bet I made 4 videos a week for about 8 weeks. And you go back and look at the first ones, and I had my iPhone propped up on the couch, and I had a whiteboard propped up on an ottoman. And a buddy of mine said it looked like a floating head because I was just my big old head there. And then I said, "This is pretty cool." So I spent a little money, not much, and bought some editing software. Eventually bought the microphone that I use now, got a used one, and put a little bit into it. Now it looks a little more professional. And I spent 10 years in the middle of my career in Ozark, Alabama. That was about the time the computers took off in the classroom. And they taught me how to do PowerPoint when they were back in the 90s. And so I married my PowerPoint abilities with the videos, and that's why all of them are PowerPoint. Most people, a teacher can figure that out. I don't know if other people can. Oh, that's PowerPoint. And that's what I do. And then I just said, people said, "Well, you ought to put that one in. You got these videos." And so I started making resources, and people were asking for copies of the presentation. So I turned those into free resources. Now I got like 48 of those that I just give you if you subscribe to the channel. And then I got the 4 that I charge for just because they're so extensive. And I thought, well, what the crap? The Apostle Paul said that the workman is worth his salary, worth his wage. We pay preachers. Why can't they pay? And I don't charge much. I tell everybody it's kind of like a coach's supplement or a stipend, just enough to justify the time away from the family when you're on the field coaching, because nobody's getting paid for all the time they spend coaching. So I charge a little for those just to justify my time. And was fortunate enough during those 40 years to coach some really good players. Several of them went on to play in the league. I got 2 that are about to make it in the league from my last year at the Lynette before I retired several years ago, the classroom retirement part. And I've had so many retirements, it's hard to count. I've retired more times than Sugar Ray Leonard. And I definitely retired more times than Tom Brady. But I got two that are about to get drafted. Did y'all see the Florida game, the Florida Kentucky game, when there were back-to-back interceptions by both teams?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, it was a big thing. They were right there. Both those guys played for me. The guy on
That's
Kentucky and
awesome.
the guy on Florida. I'm sitting there watching. Oh my God! I said, look at that. And number 7 from Florida, they intercepted it. He's the kid that got the targeting call, got thrown out of the game when he hit the kid in the butt. You remember that call?
I
It was
do. I do.
controversial. I sent him a text, and he was in the locker room after the game, and I said, "Dude, didn't we teach you better than that?" So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome, Coach. Obviously, you have a lot of great experience, and it's cool that you get to share it now. What for you has been the most rewarding or fulfilling part of doing your own show and doing your podcast and videos? Because I think for a lot of players and even coaches, when you transition to that next phase of life, it can be kind of hard to fill that void because it's such an important part for all of us when we do it with the team and the camaraderie and all that, the friendships, you name it. So, what has been the most satisfying part for you about doing the show now?
Well, the first thing is getting to meet all these coaches like you guys, Coach Brusso and Coach Collette. And I love the fact we got this ability to meet face to face and be thousands of miles apart. I've done two with one coaching staff from Ireland and one from the UK. And so in those 40 episodes we've done so far, so getting what you said, the camaraderie, that I miss from hanging out in the coach's office, I'm getting it from guys doing the podcast and just getting to see. And a lot of the guys that I've had on, probably half of the 40, I already knew, and I said, hey, man, you'll be on my podcast, and getting to see them again. And so that's been rewarding. And I use the term, it keeps my beak wet in football, which is what the YouTubes do, the videos do as well. And that's been very rewarding, getting just to hang out with coaches, even though it is just for an hour and it's just on the internet. And it's just fun. And my wife is very supportive of it. She understands that's a need in my life that needs to be filled. And for 40 years, I was a part of that. I'm reading Joe Namath's memoir right now, and he talks about how difficult it was once you step away from it. And so many other retired coaches and athletes say the same thing that were involved in team sports. It's not necessarily the actual competing and the wins and the losses. It's the being a part of something that's bigger than you. And that's what coaching is all about, is getting to do that. And so that kind of keeps me there. And I tell people, and I say this jokingly, but it's really serious too. I'm a football evangelist right now. I've entered that phase of my life. The evangelist comes in and leads a revival for a week. He preaches his best sermons, tells his best stories, tells his funniest jokes, then moves on to the next town and does the same sermons, stories, and leaves the preacher behind to deal with the day to day. That's what I do with these coaches that I do the installs with and the consults with and things like that. Because there's a lot of times I'm using this same technology and it's not going on a podcast or a YouTube. It's just me talking to a staff in Missouri or a staff in Oregon, a staff in the Bay Area. That's just one up in upstate New York. And I'm getting to be a part of their staff, albeit for temporarily, but I'm getting to tell the same stale jokes, because that staff's never heard them. And I'm preaching the same message, but to a different staff. And that's what I mean by an evangelist. I preach my message and I move on down the road to the next church. So
I love it, Coach. Let me ask you, in all those years as you were kind of shaping your system, you think it's more important for a coach to coach what they know or tailor their system to their personnel? Now, obviously, if your system is flexible enough, then maybe you can do both. But what do you think, if you're just starting out, would be the most important thing?
if you can't cater it to your talent, you don't have a system. You have an offense. Yeah. Let me tell you, in 2009, when we went to Lynette, where we won all the championships, we we had a pretty good year, but that was a loaded class, and we should have done better than we did. The next year, we had some kids that got ruled ineligible grade-wise. They didn't take care of business. We kind of fell down and didn't follow up on some things as a staff. We never let that happen again. And we had 4 kids from a small school, so it was very devastating, got recruited away. And we ended up having a promising season and went 1-9. And the system we had put, the offense we had put in, it wasn't working. And we were getting boat raced every week. We were starting in Alabama. You can play junior high kids. Once they get in 7th grade, they can play varsity football. Now you only see that at your smaller schools. Well, we actually started a 7th grader. Now, albeit he was 6 foot tall and weighed 260 pounds, but he was a legit 7th grader. I still remember he busted through the line on an extra point and blocked it with his face, and it hit so hard it drove his face mask back, and he came off the field with the bloody lip, and he was so happy he was bleeding. Just a little kid. He was built like a man, but he was a kid on the inside emotionally. He was like, "Ain't it cool, coach? Ain't it cool?" Just blood running down his face. And we had a couple of 8th graders started, a bunch of 9th graders, 10th graders, and we went 1-9. Well, midway through the season, we made the decision to go to the double wing just to survive and keep games close. And it was gap down backer and all that kind of stuff. Well, from that point on, the next year we ran a little single wing, and then it started, and then we went back under center to the wing T, which was what my roots were. And we did that for a few years and went to the 3rd and 4th round. And then we looked at it and said, look at the athletes coming through. Look at the ones that are coming. And that's when that was when the dawn of this system that a good friend of mine, I'm meeting him Friday morning. We're driving over to a clinic, going to hang out on the weekend. He was a young guy. He stayed there with me, and we married our wing T principles, not necessarily total gun wing T, but the things we wanted to keep in wing T, but also be able to spread the field with the athletes we had, but keep it the same system as far as blocking goes. And then that kept evolving. Well, then all the tight ends dried up, and we had 2 that could play tight end. So then we went no tight end at all, just 3 wide receivers. And then we really started winning. We were winning before, but we really started winning. And it was because of those kids. At any given time, there was a 2-3 year run where we had 3 wideouts on the field. Potentially the shortest one would be 6'1", potentially. We had a 6'8", a 6'6", and a 6'3". And then we had a couple of jitterbugs in the slot that we could rotate in. And we had 6 or 7 linemen that probably weighed 185 pounds that at some point in their life thought they were an H-back. The year we won the first state championship, we moved him to center. In junior high, he'd been a quarterback. And the guard, he'd been an H until 2 years before that. And that's what we were playing with. And the gap down backer scheme was perfect for those kind of kids. And that's where the whole system came out of that. And now I wanted dead air so you can go back and edit it. My wife just pulled up and my dog is about to go nuts. So you may hear him.
We'll be okay. My dog's been on the show. My daughter's come in on the show, so we're fine, Coach.
I know, buddy. I know. Tammy's home. Yeah, see. She's been gone an hour. Oh, my God.
That's the best part about dogs.
Yeah.
My wife is never that happy to see me, but my dogs are.
Yeah. All right. She's in the house. He's calmed down. All right. So the system, I think what I do can fit anybody, because here's the thing. A 280-pound kid can block down. But a 180-pound kid can't necessarily get horizontal movement on a gap on down or on a zone. And it's not that I'm anti-zone. A couple of the years I was here in Georgia, we had where my linemen didn't go both ways. And I had linemen that looked like linemen. I had linemen that knew they were linemen. At no point in their life did they think they were a quarterback or an H. And we could do some different things with them. But this system, I think, is ideal for small schools with kids that go both ways, because gap down backers, it's easy the responsibilities, and there's more to it than that. And then it's also great. I think it's the best sub varsity blocking scheme going. because you tell a 10-year-old that's never played football before, if there's something inside of you, you knock it the other way. You knock it where it is. And I was just eating a lunch yesterday with a guy I used to coach with, and I'd sent him a copy of the offensive line manual. He said, Coach, I don't understand why more people don't do this. He said, I see guys all the time with a line that doesn't weigh 200 pounds trying to run zone scheme and getting in the 2-by-2 spread, and they've got no business doing it because they're not going to knock anybody off the ball. But if somebody's running at me and I push them, their momentum's going to help me block them. Does that make sense? And in the book, in the offensive line manual, I actually talk about Hoist Gracie from Ultimate Fighting Championship. He's one of the OGs of the UFC back in the 90s. And I got a picture of him beating like a 400-pound sumo wrestler in a fight, because he uses leverage and he uses angles. And that's what gap down backer is all about. And that's the root of the system. That's the basis of it. And I just think it's the best thing going, like I said, smaller schools or schools with kids going both ways, and for sub-varsity schools, because if you don't have 15 or 20 minutes a day to work with your line, because they got to go work defensive line, they got to go work linebacker, they got, and that's the system. And there's all the things that are in it that go with it. There's spread stuff that, we marry concepts, and I just think it fits. And over time, we had different kids running it, and it just proves itself out that it is a system. And because I married two systems, kind of like the air raid and the wing T, which to me are very similar in the fact they're trying to put players in conflict, which is what both of them are trying to do. And one thing I like about what I do is I can put a player in conflict, much like an under center wing T coach can on a play. And on the very same play, I can put that backside linebacker in conflict running an RPO, because if he's going to pursue, and people ask me, how can you run buck if you don't have anybody filling on the backside like you do when you're under center? And I said, because instead of having the fullback account for that backside backer, the quarterback accounts for him with the read. And people say, well, how hard is it? I said, well, I'm 62 years old and I can still make the read and throw that pass. I mean, it's like a 15-yard pass max from where he is to where he catches it. Before the quarterback throws it, maybe 10, 12, 15-yard pass. And I get out there and show 14-year-old boys how to do it all the time. I say, look here, it is, boom. They go, oh, right. If his old butt can do it, I know I can do it, And so that's the system in a nutshell.
Coach, what do you think has let you be so adaptable and adjust to different situations or needs throughout your career, where sometimes some coaches can be really stuck to what they do or what they know, but you seem to have evolved quite a bit in your years coaching?
Because I learned a long time ago not to be that guy that says that crap won't work. And when I figured that out sometime in the late 90s, so I'm probably 12, 15 years into my career. And when I figured that out, and I became very open, there's that old saying, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. But if you're a football coach and you're going to stand on that hill that offense X is the best offense, you may be an NFL coach. And when I say NFL, that means not for long, because you got to be adaptable. And when I started becoming just devouring everything about systems, I would sit under a guy at a clinic and they said, what are you doing? You run this. And he runs. I said, I'm trying to learn something new. And there's things that I took from one system and put into what I was doing. And I think you got to be open-minded to be adaptable. It was a great story. The day after they closed everything down back in the spring of 2000, not the day, maybe the week after, when they started letting people meet kind of again, Nick Saban tells the story. He said, all right, here's the deal. He said, on my way to work today, he said, I didn't see any dinosaurs. And he's talking to his coaches, and they said, well, Coach, what are you talking about? You didn't see any I didn't see any dinosaurs because they couldn't adapt. He said, guys, this is what we're up against. He said, we got to adapt to the situation. It's adapt or die. And of course, that was one of the greatest college football seasons ever in 2020. They went through college football like a dang virus, pardon the pun. And but you have to be adaptable. You can't be, excuse me, I tell coaches all the time, I said, don't be this coach, don't be that coach. Give you an example. Had a guy on the other day on my podcast that hadn't come out yet, and he was converting to single wing. And some of his buddies, and this is a young guy, some of his young buddies said, man, aren't you afraid of being labeled a single wing guy? He goes, not as much as I'm afraid of being labeled a loser. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things also, Coach Brousseau, that makes me so adaptable is I love winning. And I want to put kids in a position to succeed. So if I go out there, my favorite system in the whole wide world is not my system. It's not. If a genie came out of the bottle and said, Coach Chip, you can have the kids for the next 10 years to run whatever offense you want to run, won't be a problem. You'll be able to plug these kids in every year. It'd be the Nebraska offense back in the mid 90s. That triple option from I loved it from the time it's just always been, I ran it in the 90s or something similar to it. And I love that old option I offense. So that's my favorite system. Here's the problem. You got to have kids that can run it. If you got one really good athlete that can run the option and the one behind him ain't very good, now you got to have two offenses. I got to have one for this quarterback. We can't run option with him. So that's what we started looking for. What can we do? If this guy goes down, we can adapt. And that's why I don't run that anymore. And that's why we got away from that. It wasn't because kids didn't want to do it. It was because it didn't become a doable offense anymore for what I had, is my point. And I can't control what gets off that bus in the morning. You know,
Those Nebraska teams with Tommy Frazier and Scott Frost were a ton of fun to watch. And I am going to get the Homer comment in. They had a 20, I believe, 6-game winning streak that was snapped.
oh no.
September 7th, 1996, when they lost 19-0 to the Arizona State Sun Devils, led by Jake Plummer on offense. I think Michael Martin and Terry Battle had a good game in that one. Pat Tillman had a fumble recovery. Derek Rogers, all those guys. Juan Roque was at left tackle. I was at every single home game that year. A wonderful Rose Bowl season. And I still, to this day, say when Jake the Snake jumped in the end zone and Brent Musburger called it, the Snake does it again. Unfortunately, Ohio State drove down and scored, preventing ASU from winning the national championship. Had that game ended with the Snake jumping in the end zone with the Snake does it again, it would be remembered, in my opinion, as one of the greatest calls and greatest plays in college football history. Very similar to how everybody kind of remembers Vince Young getting that big scramble for a touchdown against USC in the 2005, I believe, national championship win for Texas, or maybe it was 2007. But I digress. Sorry, had to get that little Homer comment in there. But moving on to the next question. In your system, do you script your first plays? If so, how do you do it? What are you looking for? Different things of that nature.
Kind of crazy, except that the people listening, if they've listened to my podcast and are longtime viewers to the YouTube channel, they've heard me say it. And I actually have a free resource. Y'all reach out to me and I'll send it to you. I tell people, and we ran fast when we could. We'd go up tempo when we could because we were a smaller school. We had to pick our spots. We couldn't do, what the college guys do, go bam, 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 because those kids had to turn around and play defense. And we'd pick our spots. So what we started doing, and this goes back to the under center days, we would try to call the game on Sunday afternoon. I know this around the country, I found that some guys don't meet on Sunday afternoons, but here in the Deep South, Sunday afternoons is the day. And all across the country, all across the Southeast, there are pickup trucks in every high school parking lot at 3:00 every Sunday afternoon. Okay, and by the way, that's another thing too. If you're going to coach in the South, you better have a pickup truck, and or we're going to look at you side-eyed. And so we call the game on Sunday, and what we'll do, we'll sit down. It was usually me and the same guy I was talking about a while ago, Ernest Webb, that's going to go to the clinic with me this weekend. And he would stay after with me, and we would sit there and we'd pretend that we were ahead of the chains. And we would call, and we started out doing it like Bill Walsh, like 10 plays or whatever. And then one day, this is a serious story. So I'm watching college football. It may have been pro football on a Sunday evening, and we'd already had our meeting, and I was doodling with some scripts, multiple scripts, and the commercial came on. It was an AT&T commercial, and it was when they were advertising bundling. You could bundle your phone, your internet, your cable all into one bill. They called it bundling. And at the time, I'm working on scripts. I went like, if they can bundle internet and they can bundle phone and television, I can bundle plays. And so I pushed aside what I was doing, and instead of making big, long, drawn out scripts, we made a series of scripts, 4 or 5 plays in a bundle. And we would color code them and name them or number them. And we'd get in a bundle and go boom, boom, boom. Now it's all predicated on staying ahead of the chains. So once we had called the game on Sunday, pretending we stayed ahead of the sticks, then we went back and looked, okay, we get a holding call on first down because a referee's lost his friggin' mind, because we all know there is no such thing as offensive holding in football, and that is an evil, evil conspiracy theory started by defensive coaches, and referees have bought into that crap. There is no such thing as holding. But let's just say
Amen.
let's just say it happens. Coach Brusso, you don't seem very happy. Are you a defensive coach?
I'm just here to coach football, Coach.
He is
I
a
support the
defensive
team.
coach.
And
So
so,
I and team.
so let's say we got a penalty, and now it's 1st and 20. All right, then we got over here on the other side of our call sheet, we've got our what if column, if you will. And, what are you going to call on 1st and 20? All right, let's say something else happens, and instead of being 2nd and 6, it's 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8. We got the what if. We go boom right over to it. Because people would ask me, how do you call the play so fast? I say, I called it on Sunday afternoon. I called it on Sunday evening. And it goes back to, even though I'm 62 years old, I'm still a little boy at heart. I don't have a problem playing pretend. And I would just pretend that we were ahead of the sticks, we were on schedule, and what will we do? And then we'd go back and pretend, okay, now we're behind the sticks. That's this column. And we'd have the columns over there, it would say like 2nd and 8, and there'd be 2 or 3 plays. 3rd and 10, 2 or 3 plays. Or whatever, and and I also have a free call sheet that if they'll hit me up, I'll send them the call sheet, how we did it. And on one side of it, it's got every play, it's like the menu. And on the other side, it's got the bundles and then the scenarios, the different scenarios. And that's how we did it. And so, yes, I do believe in scripting, but I think we took it in another direction. And I'm a big fan of Bill Walsh. I've read all of his books and listened to them on runs. But the bundling to me is the best thing going. And there's times like we were just better than the other team, and I would tell the guy signaling plays, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Run that bundle again." They ain't even thought about stopping it. It was one time it was like 28-0 at halftime. We run the same 4 plays in the same order over and over again the entire first half. Now, granted, it's predicated on hash mark. Like if you look, so really let's say it's a 4-play bundle. Really and truly, it's 8 plays. Because on the first play, it may be you're on the left hash. So let's just say the first play is jet right, is jet. Well, on the left hash, it's jet right. On the right hash, it's jet left. Okay, let's say the second play is jet counter. Well, you're going to fake jet to the field. So if you're on the left hash, it'll be jet counter left is the second play. And then of course our jet power was run to the field. And people would say like, well, don't they figure that out? Well, good luck figuring it out. We're snapping it within 10 or 15 seconds. And again, I've told people, I don't care if it's Buddy Ryan on the other in his prime. If he's coaching a 16-year-old boy, that's the only one I got to fool with. I ain't worried about beating Buddy Ryan. He can coach circles around me, but that 16-year-old boy can't coach circles around me, and he's the one that's got to get lined up. And he's got to execute and make his reads, and we're giving all the eye candy and all that kind of stuff too. So that's how we script.
As a play caller, something I've noticed defensively is that oftentimes I feel like the play callers will get a little impatient or a little antsy and maybe veer away from what is working or what we on the defensive side are feel like might pop here pretty soon, like we're holding on by a thread. So what do you think taught you, and when did you learn this, to be patient, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and just keep running it until they stop? Like, was that a challenge for you? Did you always understand that?
No, I did not always. There's nothing I always understood, Coach Bruce. Uh, I'm not smart, but I'm a slow learner, and I figured it out eventually.
Right
I've
there
got a,
with
I've got a really, really good friend who's a defensive guy, and I think I've hired him or been a part of a party of hiring him 3 or 4 different times at different places. When I retired from Alabama, I brought him to Georgia with me. He's a good defensive coach, and he'll tell you to this day, who do you not want to call against? And he'll say, Coach, I don't want to call against Chip Seagle. He said, because his thing is he's going to give up underneath stuff. He's going to make you, it's high school football. You know, they're going to make a mistake or they're going to get impatient. The coach will. And he said, Chip doesn't get impatient. If you're going to give me the flat, I'm going to take the flat. Now, that quarterback, me getting that message, what I just said about defensive coaches and younger kids, it applies to offensive coaches and offensive younger kids too. One of the best quarterbacks I ever coached, I can show you film his 10th grade year when I'm running a smash concept on a play action, and the guy on the idle route 5 yards up the field standing on top of the tick marks is jumping up and down doing jumping jacks. He's so wide open, and my 10th grade quarterback is throwing a corner route to a covered receiver. That's going to happen. But what I stress to him is take what they're giving you. Take what they're giving you. And it wasn't something that I knew all along. I would get impatient, as a young coach. And you have to make yourself say, they're going to give you that. Make them take that away. And that's the other thing about a system, y'all. When they take something away, they got to give something up. And that's one of the main things that offensive play callers have to understand is they take what's being given to you. You got to have a base play, and you run that base play. And it's got to be, and the play is not a good play if they can take it away from you and not give something else up. So if you got a play like that, get rid of that play because that's not a good play. So if you got something they're giving you and you're hammering it and hammering it, hammering it, or I like to run series like the jet, the counter, the jet power, all together, the jet play action pass. That's four plays right there. I just believe unless you're just better than me or better than my kids, your kids are better than my kids, you can't take away all 4. So my job is to figure out what are you doing? Are you involving the safety in run support? Because if you are, sooner or later, I'm going to hit that backside post off a jet. Are the linebackers hauling butt out of the box on jet action? If they are, we're going to run power or counter. Are you chasing the jet? If you're chasing the jet, by God, I'm going to run counter. And that's what. And I would have coaches, and so we would have a lot of young guys, and that's what we loved having the young guys, coaches. Say, what do you want me to do? I said, okay. I said, every time you see jet motion, your job is to watch that backside outside linebacker. I said, don't watch anything else. But if you see, and we spent the money and had headsets, so guys could hear the call. And I told them, I said, keep your mic turned up on top of your head. You're not talking, you're listening. And they would, when they hear jet, any kind of jet, it didn't have to be a jet play, just the jet action. They knew they were watching this particular guy. Or if they heard this call, they were watching this particular guy. And I learned that from Coach Johnson, the Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern Navy coach, wishbone, flexbone, because I heard him, here's me running my hybrid wing tee spread stuff, sitting under a flexbone guy at a clinic, and took something away from it. One of his assistants was recruiting our kid one time, one of our kids. And I was asking him, I said, I heard Coach Johnson talking about this. And he said, Coach, I believe Coach Johnson can call a football game from his house, sitting in his recliner on the telephone. I said, what do you mean? He said, just tell him who made the tackle. He'll know what play to call. And that's what he had said.
I've looked at a lot of stuff Paul Johnson does, and I'll tell you the most helpless I've ever felt on the sideline in terms of helping our kids was a team that ran the flexbone really, really well.
Boy.
It is a bear. an absolute bear to stop. If you got a quarterback, I remember an all-region meeting years ago, and one of the coaches was really frustrated. It wasn't even my kid, but I voted for the flex bone quarterback, and his stats were not great. He ran the ball when he could and had some good stuff going, but the other kid had way more passing yards and different stuff. And I was like, you can't, his impact on that offense doesn't go on the stat sheet, because when he reads it and gives the dive for 12, that doesn't go for anything for him. But the kid was like a little general. He knew exactly where to go with the ball in that system. And that thing can be so difficult to stop when you got it going the right way. So moving on, next question. How do you ensure vertical alignment within your program? In terms of at a smaller school, it might just be one lower level team or a junior high team or what have you. But how do you ensure those kids are doing it? Is it progression based? Does this team run this many plays and then you add this? Or how do you go about doing that so your kids are getting it all the way through?
Sometimes it's difficult because the rec league coaches sometimes, I think, feel threatened, the youth league coaches, by the high school staff or the middle school staff. And I've even seen where the middle school guys felt threatened. But all the successful programs, I'm not talking about a team that got hot for 3 or 4 years. I'm talking about teams that are just good year in and year out. And a bad year for them is 6-4, 7-3. That's a down year. But they're going to go 3-4 rounds deep and sometimes play for multiple state championships over a 20-year period. Same head coach. We got one here in North Alabama called Fife. And for my money, the best small school program in the United States. When I say small school, I mean like 400, 500 kids or less. And I've talked to him, Coach Benefield. The way he can make more money is that little town he's in makes him, he's the rec director. So guess who's in charge of who the coaches are going to be for the youth league teams? He is. And guess what? Every one of them played for him. And you literally have to try out, and you're going to run his system. Now, you may not be in the same formations, but you're going to run his blocking scheme. You're going to use his terminology. So when those kids move out of, let's say, the 12 and under leagues and go to the junior high or middle school, when they get to those school coaches, they know they know this means this means that. They know how to execute this block. They may have been still running under center wing T, and he moved on now running that Tim Murphy ugly gun thing. And that's what they call it. They call it the ugly offense. I'm not being critical of it. It's nasty.
That's another one that's really tough to stop.
Oh my God, it's filthy. And but those kids are doing those same blocks. They teach the wrap the same way to the 8-year-old that they teach to the 18-year-old. They teach the down blocks the same to everybody. And that's what you have to have if you're going to build a program that's going to last the test of time. You got to have, there's got to be that vertical. What was the term you used, Coach?
Vertical alignment.
Vertical. You got to have
that's
vertical
alignment. That's an education
alignment.
term. That's a buzzword in teaching now.
I missed that one. I've been out of the classroom for a couple of years. Valdosta High School, Wintersville, down in South Georgia, won more football games than any team in the world. For years, that same thing I just told you, Fife High School in North Alabama, just a miniature Valdosta. Those youth league coaches are teaching the same thing. Those junior high coaches teaching the same thing. And when they got up to the high school, it was just a carryover. It's a program from whatever year they start to when they graduate. And you've got to have that. And you got to have coaches that can swallow their pride. And, I always love when I'd go to a new place when the junior high guy would come in and say, Coach, what are you going to run? Show me. I want to do your stuff. I go, oh, good. Thank God I don't have to go sell it. Or the youth league coaches will stop by during the summer after the weightlifting and say, hey, can you teach us this? And I always had time for them. Every year I'd call the rec director, wherever I was, I'll do a clinic free. And the problem was coaches wouldn't come sometimes. And they were so desperate for coaches, they couldn't say, well, if you don't go to this, you can't do it. And it's kind of hard to hold them accountable. Those guys aren't getting paid, which is why I do what I do. A lot of my stuff, you've watched it, it's aimed at sub-varsity that they can do. There's stuff that you can do in high school too, but it's a lot of it because think about this, Coach, and I've said this before, people have heard it, 90 to 95% of all the football programs in the United States, I'm talking about from the little bitty kids all the way up to high school, 95% of them, the kids are going both ways. They don't have that many players, and they're exactly what I teach. The ones, it's not the teams, St. John Bosco, that you see on ESPN in August. Those just, everybody thinks that's high school football now. That's not high school football. That's less than 10% of high school football. It's not the, yeah, it's, when Hoover was doing their thing back in the early 2000s, that wasn't indicative of the rest of high school football. Right now in Alabama, Thompson High School is just, they're ruling high school football in Alabama, but that's not the majority of us. The majority of us are having to coach what gets off that bus every morning, and we're not in charge of it. And we got kids going both ways. If we don't have kids going both ways, we got in there what I call plugs, somebody you're just plugging in that you're trying to hide. And that's what I'm aiming at. And that's what this system that you ask about, that's what it's aiming at, is you got to be able to do this, at all these multiple levels. And what you see on ESPN right before college football starts, those 2-3 weekends where they show the high schools on ESPN, that's the general fan thinks that's high school football. Bruh, it's not. you know?
You mentioned, Coach, that getting vertical alignment, one of the biggest challenges is getting people to swallow their pride or leave that at the door. And I found that you run into that not even in sports, but just in any area of life, and no matter where you live or what you do. So, what have you found to help bring those people on board and find success in your different stops?
You got to figure out a way where you don't look like the hired gun that's come in, because those guys coaching the youth league programs, they're from there. They were born and raised there. Their kids are in the school system. And you're coming in and they look at you and say, well, you'll be like the last guy. You'll be here 2 or 3 years and you'll be gone. You got to sell it. It's no different than when a college football coach is recruiting a kid. You got to let the kid know what's in it for him. You got to let that coach know what's in it for you. And I'm here to help you. And I'm going to, if you want me to, I'll show you this. And this is what worked for me. And then you take it and do what you want. If you're in a system where they don't have a rec director that says you're going to do it this way. But if you're not in a Fife or a Valdosta type situation where it's a dream world and you're picking the coaches, you got to recruit them just like you're recruiting a college guy's recruiting. You got to get him on the same page with you, but let him see what's in it for him. Do you want to win football games? Do you want to get out there with a bunch of 10 and unders and go 2 by 2 because that's what you see the Chiefs do on Sunday? I got news for you. Your thick ankle son's the quarterback, not Patrick Mahomes. But you can't say it that way. But that's what you're thinking to him. You're thinking like, dude, I've watched your son. He can't throw a cat out of the house with all the windows open. So, but you can't say that to them. You can turn them off. You got to recruit those guys at the lower level. Heck, I've heard of places, man, where the principal or the superintendent won't make the junior high coach do what the varsity's doing. And I'm going to tell you, that's toxic. And I say this to young coaches. If you can't be loyal, then you need to find somewhere else to coach. Head coaches, coordinators, if you can't be loyal to the administration because they're not doing things the way you think it ought to be done, you got to find somewhere else to coach. And because if they're not backing you up, making those junior high coaches, and I see this on Twitter all the time, where they talk about coordinators. When you come in, you run your offense. You don't do what the head coach says. Bull crap. You do exactly what the head coach says. And if you can't, you need to find somewhere else to coach, because ain't nobody. This is high school football, and people ain't firing a coordinator. They're firing the head coach. And we've got a website here in Alabama that's got every game ever played. It's the best website. It's the history. It's called the Alabama High School.
It's outstanding.
It's unbelievable. I live in Georgia, just inside of Georgia, and Georgia's got one too. But that's one thing that Georgia does not do as well as Alabama is that website. Georgia's is not as good. It's not as easy as to go. But you know what? They got a list of all the coaches and all their wins. And you know what I haven't seen, Coach? You know what I haven't seen? I haven't seen a single coordinator or position coach's name on that list. Hello?
Absolutely. I know exactly what website you're talking about, and I have looked at it, and I find that one fascinating. That one and the Arizona has one. It doesn't. It has most everything. It doesn't. You would have to go look at the coach's record, but it does have most of the team's coaches all the way back. And incidentally, if I get a little plug in for PHS, we've played football since 1910, and one of the only schools on the Arizona one that we have a victory in 1914 over Tempe Normal, which, if you don't know, Tempe Normal became Arizona State later. So, little fun fact there for you.
Pretty
But
cool.
moving on to
Also NAU. Come on,
that's
man.
true, which was Flagstaff College when we played them. But moving on to the next question, one of the things I like most about following your stuff and your videos is minor little tweaks within your system. Your gut play, which we call IZABs, which we blatantly stole and has been a very successful play for us. What I would say is in the power family, but ends up being a combination of ISO, combination of like a fold. How do you go about tweaking week to week? And what are you looking at positionally that determines where you're going to make those tweaks? We know you're going to run power. We know you're going to run jet counter, all those things. But how do you go about putting in the little wrinkles in the game plan from a week-to-week basis?
Excuse me. That goes along with having a system too, that you got to have the ability. And we actually did this in the playoffs where we knew this team was going to give us four eyes. And it was going to be difficult to run the gut. What do you call it? What nabs?
We call it IZABs. Eyes are code word for ISO, and we used to call it gut. But when we signaled and we said gut, a lot of times those inside backers, it goes coming up the middle.
Yeah.
So we started calling it abs if we had to communicate it at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. So we would actually just tell our guards, this week you're playing tackle. And that was the great thing about the gap down backer system is it's not a big deal to swap those guys because any of our linemen that were decent, we could take their wristbands and swap them out because they get in the same terminology. They look at their wristband and they go like, oh, it says gap down backer. Well, they don't care if they're lined up at tight end or tackle or guard. Gap down backer's gap down backer. It says wrap, that kind of thing. And so we would literally change the guard and tackle. And we may just do it for a possession because we know we're about to run the gut. And now we're going to turn out, because I'm looking for angles, we're going to turn out with that tackle and fold, invert the wrap. Instead of coming from the backside, it's coming from the play side. He's wrapping up right there. And we had a good center that could handle the nose. When I say handle him, I don't mean drive him off the ball. I just mean stay engaged with him. Because on this, the way we do it, we'd go double fold and fold both of them, block out with the guards, fold with the tackles, and lead up in there. Then you bring the third one, the H wrapping in there. Now you got three guys wrapping in the inside. And all your center's got to do is just keep the nose guard busy, and the running back reads his block.
That's off of him. Yeah, exactly.
I say, if he wants to go left with him. If he wants to go right with him. Just get busy. I'm not obsessed with, I'm going to knock you off the ball. I'm going to impose my will on you. Dude, like I said, I joke with this all the time. I tell him, I said, dude, I don't care what you got to do. If you got to slip him a 20 not to make the tackle, that's a hell of a block.
Wildcats, baby.
The best looking football coach in the history of football, by the way.
Goldie Hawn, she's 70 and she's still a looker.
Still smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. Coach Brusso, do you have anything on that one?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were waiting for me.
No worries, no worries.
I just look like a dunce.
Moving on to the next question there. Coach, how do you go about installing your offense, both from a full camp perspective when you're getting your offense installed and possibly even from a game week prep perspective?
Well, I have not done a true install in so many years. Once Alabama just pretty much took the rules off summer practice and you could pretty much do anything except wear pads, everything was installed by August 1st. It was in. But we had a pecking order, and we were a gap scheme team, and Buck was always the first thing we put in because it had the most moving parts, with both guards wrapping and, in a perfect world. But that's a whole nother story because we don't always wrap, we don't always pull the guards. But we would do that. So it would always be that first because the way I looked at it, when we put power and counter in later, we've already put in gap down backer blocks. We've already put in the wrap. We've already put in the kick. Now the kick's a little different, on buck because it's wider. The wrap's a little different because it's wider, but they've already, they've learned to wrap. And we do what we call short kicks, short wraps, and they would know on the backside guard's got 3 wraps. He's got the buck wrap, the power wrap, and the gut wrap. And that's what and so we would put them in that order. Buck would always be first. Usually Jet would be second. And those were our 2 bread and butter plays. And once we got Buck and Jet installed, then it was just easy peasy putting in power, counter, and gut, because all the blocks are going to execute on power, counter, and gut have already been put in. Now they're just doing them in different order, different way.
So let me ask you, Coach, to build on that, because have alluded to it a couple times. Do your linemen have a wristband that just says wrap or just says gap down backer or just says this? Because I've always thought about doing that, and I never have pulled the trigger, and I'm really curious how you've gone about doing that.
Not as much as we used to. It used to be the whole thing. When we were under center, I would have 3 panes all full. Now you'd say, like, Coach, that's wing T. There's not that many plays. But you have all the different formations. So we could call it quick. We'd go like red 1. They look at red 1. Well, red 1 may be buck right, and then green 22 is also buck right, but it's a different formation. And so, yes, we called them dummy bands, and the kid would look at it and it'd tell him what to do. Well, as we evolved more into the spread stuff, we got away from necessarily the linemen having it, even though we did give them wristbands. And now that I'm out of it, I can tell you the whole story. I can tell you the whole scheme. Y'all want to hear it?
Absolutely.
We would teach schemes, blocking schemes. For instance, the one we were talking about, gut. Gut left was Georgia, because Georgia. Gut right was dogs, Georgia Bulldogs. Gut right. Okay, because when you look at, if you're reading, I used to say when you're reading a newspaper, but now when you're reading a website, when you're reading about the Georgia Dogs winning their football game, what word comes first? They said Georgia. I said, what word comes second? They said dogs. I said, which one's on the left? Georgia. Which one's on the right? Dogs. Our counter, our GH counter, was Clemson Tigers. You got a C and a T, Clemson Tigers, counter. Clemson means to the left, Tigers means to the right. And we would teach them conceptually. And then power was always the name of the school. Power left was, when we were at Lynette, it was Lynette. Power right was Panthers. We were the Lynette Panthers, because we would tell them, this is our play. This is the Lynette Panther play. This is the play that makes Lynette great. So we do that. Our GT counter was Florida Gators. Check that out. Gators, G and T. Florida was to the left. Gators was to the right. And if you look on some of my stuff, you'll see where I talk about ghost. I got Gator. The Gator is GT and the Ghost is GH, but we called it Clemson Tiger, and then we called it Florida Gator. And then the Jet, we changed it a lot because we did so much with it. Sometimes we called it Stanford Cardinal for years, because Stanford was for stretch, because we called it stretch blocking, and that's why we did that. And once the kids learned it, and then the Buck was and we changed it out. But my favorite Buck call was Denver was Buck left, Broncos was Buck right, because a Bronco bucks, and that's how we'd sell it to them. And once, if we had some really sharp linemen, we may be running power read right. Well, the H knows that he's going to whiff the DN because we're going to read him. Okay, but the linemen, we would just say Panthers. They're blocking power right. Or we're going to run it to the left. We go Lynette. So conceptually, I got my O-line coach down here giving them signals, or sometimes we use signboards, and the linemen are looking at them. Then my other guy down here is signaling into the skill guys, and he may be giving them something on the wristband, or he may be giving them something that's a one-word call. But they're actually looking at 2 different coaches, because there was one guy who figured it out, and he had a baseball coach, and baseball coaches are the best at stealing signs. Sorry, rascals. And they figured it out, but we were just so much better, and then we still won. But afterwards, he told me, he said, Coach, we figured it out. You got 2 different guys signaling, and this one's giving you this. He said, but it makes you feel any better. He said, we still couldn't stop it. We scored 35 on them. So that was not testimony to Coach Chip. That was our kids. They were pretty daggum. And that was in the state championship game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. in Tuscaloosa, and we were riding the elevator down. And he said, I had you figured out midway through the second quarter. The baseball coach he said, you need to tell your cameraman next year to quit catching the sidelines. And so from that point on, I started editing my film before I shared it. If my camera guy was catching our signals, I'd edit it. And sometimes they didn't get the film until mid-morning on Sunday. I didn't give a crap because I was not going to send them film that had my signals on it. And that's how they stole it. And then they confirmed it in the first quarter of the game. And then from the second quarter on, they had the signals. But it was because my camera guy was shooting our signals from behind. And so but that was the best system for me, for my linemen, was always, because once they figured it out, you could do all kind of cool things with it. And then you could tag it, with different things. And I always let the kids come up with the tags because they'll remember them. I said, I don't care what you call it. Just tell me what it is. And as long as it's not overtly dirty that people in the stands can hear it, I don't care. If it's, but I had an old coach, much older than me, tell me years ago, he said, if it's a little dirty, a teenage boy will never forget it.
There is some truth. Our now offensive coordinator, previous defensive coordinator, would probably agree with that, but there is some truth to that.
Yeah.
Now, Coach, you sparked my curiosity. Whatever happened to your cameraman? Is he doing okay? And was he ran out of town for his malfeasance?
Actually, he was our baseball coach, and he had a side hustle. He had a side hustle shooting weddings and things like that. He was really good with audio video stuff. And now he is over the audio visual department of a big 7A school in Alabama, and no longer in coaching, but he's making really good money and teaching kids to go on and have careers in communication. So yeah, I didn't get too mad at him because we were giving him like $100 a game, and we were getting like we had a fight after a game in 2016. He was able to enhance the video, blow it up, and show where the other team had started the fight. So he was in like Flynn. I mean, we took that to the state association and said, and we showed it, and it was like one of these cop shows where they're enhancing the video and showing it to you. And we're sitting there clicking it. He said, there it is, number 52. Rabbit punched our kid in the handshake line. You could see it. And so
One doesn't lie.
No, the eye in the sky does not lie.
Love it, Coach. All right, so moving on here. I could do this all day, by the way, but last couple of questions here. When you're going about practice, I talked to you about this the other day when I was on your podcast. I think one of the biggest parts about your system is learning how to practice it. It seems like it's so simple, but walk me through a typical practice schedule just from an offensive perspective. We don't need to get into it defensively, but from an offensive perspective.
We would generally work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on a 2-hour template. I've got that too. I'll send you my practice schedules. They're set up for 2 platoon and 1 platoon. It's a Microsoft Excel. If I don't send it to you tonight, remind me, hit me up.
All right.
And anybody else out there listening, look in the show notes and get my email address, and I'll send it to you. But I got the call sheets available and the practice plans available. But a typical practice for 1 platoon, which is what I did most of my career, the last part of my career, it was about 5-minute periods. We'd go 3 minutes of ID, and we had certain things we did. Like one day it was like the jet buck day. Another day was the power counter day or the gut day, whatever it was. And that's what the linemen would work on during that. That's what the running backs, the quarterbacks, and our quarterbacks never had ID time ever. In pre-practice, they would throw, but they were always with the running backs or the receivers, always. And so that's how we would steal reps. And so whatever the theme was for that day, so it's a power counter day for run game. Everything they did in those 15 minutes was aimed toward that. Then now the receivers, they don't give a crap about that. So it's a power counter day. While we're doing ID time, they may do 5 minutes of just catching drills, but then they're going to work on their RPO routes or their quick routes that go along with power counter. All of it coming together. And then we'd go to what we call combo time. My buddy Kenny Simpson calls it pods, where you take different groups of kids from different positions and put them together. and they'd work on a specific thing. We called it combo time just because it was a combination of groups. And usually that was inside run for us, but not always. Sometimes we'd break up the inside run and do it, have two inside runs going, one doing this, one doing that. And we'd do like 15 minutes of inside run. And then, and by the way, anytime we had a water break, it was only 2 minutes and it was only for transition. We didn't give real water breaks. And people might go, that's crazy. No, what you got to do is you got to spend the money, get enough 6-packs of the water bottles for every coach to have one. And even if you ain't got but one or two managers keeping them filled up, those coaches got that water with them all the time, and those kids can drink anytime they want to in between reps. So they're drinking water for 2 hours solid. They'll do a rep, they go, get them a swig of water. And so that's why we never took real, like the 5-minute water breaks. They ended up with the kids playing grab tail or something like that because they get bored. So we do like 2-minute breaks. So in between like ID time and combo time, there'd be a 2-minute transition for coaches to get everything set up, kids getting their water bottles, quick. And then we go combo time, inside run, and now they're doing pass skelly over here with their skill guys. The quarterbacks would go back and forth in between. And that's where you got to have somebody paying attention. So you got 3 5-minute periods. Well, that doesn't divide up in half. So you got to have somebody that's paying attention at the 2.5 mark of that middle period, blow the whistle for the quarterbacks to swap, or sometimes for the H's to come from the receivers. I'd have one H working with inside run, another H working with pass skelly, and then they'd flip halfway through that middle period. I say it's a 3-period section of the practice. Does that make sense? So it's 15 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So we'd go 7.5 minutes. The H's and quarterbacks would swap, and then do the other 7.5 minutes. And then somewhere in there, depending on the day, one day we would do our screen drill for a 5-minute period. And the first time you do our jet drill and our screen drill, it looks like it looks like disaster. It looks like chaos. So that was the great thing about the way we do it in Alabama, and Georgia does it too. You can practice all summer. We get those drills in. And so all we had to do is have them set up and say, all right, screen drill. So before we'd go to team time, we would do a screen drill or jet drill, depending on the day or what needed attention. It was 5 minutes of nothing but jet. And there'd be 2 groups going, one group doing jet right or screen right, another group doing jet left or screen left during those times. And then we'd blow the whistle again, then it's time for team time. Here's the thing about team time. We never ran jet or screens in team time. Never ran jets or screens in team time. Why? Because we had a drill set aside for it. A team drill, a big group drill that they were doing. So then what we would do during our team time is we would run our bundles. And I had a brilliant quarterback. He's about to sign a contract to play safety in the NFL. But he was a football genius, and he was also a genius in the classroom. If we practice those things on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, he'd have the bundles memorized by Friday night. And I could just look out there and go like, run the red bundle. And he would call it. There'd be times like we had a rule, even when we didn't go fast, anytime we had a big play, we were going to go hurry up. The next play, we were going to go hurry up. So let's say we had a long pass, 30 yards. So we'd run down the field, balls on the right hash. He knew what was coming. When he was in 10th grade, his first year starting, about midway through the season, he's waving me off on the sideline like this. I'm going, what the crap is he doing? I said, he's going to call his own play. And he lines up and runs jet left because he knew we had just had a long play. The defense is gassed, and we're about to run jet to the field. The ball's on the right hash. Coach Chip's about to call jet left, and he called it. Boom, and we run jet left. And then if it was big, we'd come right back again with another big one. It'd be jet power, jet counter. And that's how we did it. And it's just, and the system is set. Let me give you this hack. 3rd and short. And I learned this from an under center guy back in the 90s that I coached with. Nothing wide open about this guy. He was going to run I formation or power bone. That's what he was going to do. He was going to come right at you. He was going to stick that football right up your nose, right past your mustache. But I got this from him and I've been doing it ever since. 3rd and short, you got to play that week. You got a 1-word call. And all you do is say that word. I don't care what that word is. That word could be grape. I don't care. And if every kid on the field, you practice it all week, and what we'd do is blow the whistle in the middle of practice, like in the middle of a transition time, and we'd yell, "Great, great, great." The starting offense would run out on the ball. I have an assistant that's already spotted the ball before I blew the whistle and yelled, "Great." They got to line up and run that great play that week. I'm just making the name up. And they'd run it right there. And we'd do that off and on all week. And so on Friday night, the first third and short we get, we'd call that word, boom, that word tells the kid where to line up. That word tells if there's any motion, it tells them what the snap count is, and it tells them what the play is. And let's just say most of the time it was power right, okay, because that was what it was. And so we'd call that word and we'd line up. Now, if you do that 3 or 4 times during the game, and now it's the third or fourth quarter, and it's 3rd and 2, and you line up and you call no play, one word no play, and you go, "Hut," what's that defense going to do?
They're jumping.
Oh, they can't stand it.
100%.
They can't stand it. And if you throw jet motion into your no play like that, I guarantee they'll jump twice. That's how bad they'll jump. I'm telling you, jet to a high school defensive player is like catnip. They can't stand it. They can't stand it. And dude, I can show you film where the backside defensive end is jumping off sides on jet action. Why the crap is he jumping off sides? The motion's going away from him. They can't stand it, Coach.
I love it. Catnip. I love it. All right, last question, Coach. I always ask, we get offensive guys on here. This, I think, is a fun one, and I'll give you my answer on this. If you had to pick 5 concepts, both run and pass. Now, the RPO world makes it so you can be a little bit of a cheater, because you can get kind of multiple concepts in on this. But if you had to pick 5 concepts, run and pass, what would they be? I'll tell you mine. Power, counter, and I go back and forth with lead G or your gut play, but I'm going to say your gut play so we have an inside component covered. Cross, what a lot of people call Yankee, and we'll go 4 verts. So that's our 5 concepts there if I had to pick. What would your 5 be if you had to pick just 5, run and pass?
Buck, jet, and power counter. Remember what we talked about before? Power counter is the same concept. Okay, so that's my 3rd concept. All right, so buck, jet, power counter. 2 pass concepts. I got a trips concept that in 2015, my quarterback sent me a text with this play drawn up on it. I said, well, that looks pretty cool. Hang on. I said, let me look at it. What that meant is, let me call my buddy, the air raid guru, who was, seriously, and ask him, what is this? What's the progression? How do you read it? And we're still best friends. We coached together back in the early 90s, and he was on the first air raid staff in the state of Alabama. This dude used to go out on summers and spend a week with Mike Leach in Lubbock. Okay, he knows the air raid. Okay, yeah. He knows it. And he goes, oh, yeah, we called it this. And I said, oh, okay. And all it was, Coach, it was what some people call the double post. I'll tell you the exact play. In 2017, it was the play that Tua threw to Devontae Smith to beat Georgia in the national championship game. Alabama called it Seattle because that game was over about midnight here.
I remember.
My phone was blowing up with former players, coaches on staff, former coaches, current players. That's our Halls. Well, we called it Trey then because that was the quarterback's name, Trey. I later changed it to Halls because I didn't want to explain to people why it was Trey anymore. I called it Halls because it was H across. HOSS, H across. And you can do it with, say it's trips right. You got a guy he can run a post or he can run a takeoff or what I call a go route. A go route to me is either a curl or a takeoff. Go, G-O stands for get open. Okay. We can line up and call like, go, 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 all go, all go. Well, what's the defense thinking? They're going to take off. And so, boom, they getting open. They just curl up. Boom. That was our 3rd and long play forever, was just put them in a bind by yelling it right now. Go, 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 go. And the line knew when they heard go, they were doing pass protection. But anyway, back to this play. And then so the number 2 receiver would run a post. The number 3 receiver, the H, would run what I call cross. And the magic of 22, he would best release possible. I told him to be water. Find the path of least resistance, inside release, outside release, jump over him. I don't care. Get off the line of scrimmage. And as soon as you clear the line of scrimmage, You break it off and you run at an angle at an imaginary cone, which in practice wasn't imaginary, that was 22 yards from the line of scrimmage on the other sideline. Dude, that dude's going to be as buck naked wide open as the day he was born. Because high school linebackers and even college linebackers cannot cover diagonal routes. Now, the safety winds up, one high, this kills one high. The safety has got to pick the post behind him or the cross in front of him. Here's what's killer. The quarterback against one high is reading the weak side outside linebacker. The weak side outside linebacker against one high. Why? Because he's the only one that can undercut that H cross. And but the running back is set to the weak side, he's running a flat route, shoot, we call it a shoot. So if that outside linebacker drops to undercut the H cross, we're just throwing it in the flat. Because the lone receiver away from trips, he's running a takeoff too, and that corner's gone. So that outside linebacker thinks we're going to throw it to the running back. And now we're going to have open field tackling practice for the linebacker in the corner. If the linebacker jumps, which in high school ball, they're going to jump that running back, an outside linebacker, then you're throwing it to that H. Well, then you go to the safety. What's the safety taking? And it happens a lot quicker than it took me to explain it. You just go, all right, outside linebacker did that, go to the safety, boom, gone. And it's almost on rhythm. Against two high, same exact thing, except now you're reading the weak side safety because he's the one that can take away the cross. Does he spin down or does he drop? And then we also taught that H when he got good at it, if that safety drops, just curl up right there in the middle of the field because don't worry about it. Those linebackers ain't covering you. I used to be afraid of throwing the ball across the middle when I was a young coach. And when I say young, I still mean when I was 40. But about 15 years, about my mid-40s, I figured out, my goodness, inside linebackers are the worst pass defenders on the field. And I've learned it at a 7-on-7. I go, but here's why. What do they do? You go watch a high school practice. What are they doing? They're doing drills to stop the run. They're stepping up. They're great run pluggers. I don't care how good they are. They're terrible pass defenders. Every now and then you got a good one, but on average, who are the worst pass defenders in the secondary? The inside linebackers, because they're getting paid to stop the run from tackle to tackle. They're not getting paid to drop back there. They're not Urlacher that's dropping back in a Tampa 2, okay? I mean, they're high school kids. And their linebacker coach is telling them, you got to step up. You got to step up. I don't care what they do. I hate 7-on-7 because they're teaching you to back up. You got to step up. You got to. That's another thing.
Coach,
pay attention to what defensive coordinators and coaches are saying to their kids. You can get a lot from them.
To your point about the one high, a couple of years ago when I was in the state playoffs at another school, we were heavy single high match coverage. And we were really good at taking away the crosses and our backers dropping deep. But I tell you, the running backs would just give us fits because it's pretty much unaccounted for. They would have everything locked, and then they'd run for 10, 20 yards,
Take what they're giving you. Take what they're giving you. And then my fifth concept is what I just call it China for no good reason, is a play action pass where it's like a smash concept. You run it to the twin side. You can run it to trips too and have an extra guy in the flat. But we generally would run it like we'd fake buck right, or you could fake power right. Quarterback does a semi-roll like a boot action, and he's reading the defensive end as he's squeezing, as he's running upfield. We got the guy coming to block him. And the number one receiver on the twin side is running what I call an idle route. He's getting on the numbers, and when the ball's snapped, he's running at an angle to a point 5 yards from the line of scrimmage and posting up on the tick marks. That's what I call those lines that are inside the out of bounds lines. And you want to be at the top of those tick marks, so in case you have to, kind of like a guy shooting a three in the corner, when he puts his foot back, you don't want him to step out of bounds. But he wants to be on those tick marks and just post up like a basketball guy on the low block, which helped us because our receivers play basketball. And the number two receiver ran an old school corner. Dude, it worked against one high, it worked against two high. And because those outside linebackers are not going to get to that idle route. Okay. And if they're too high, that corner may sit on that idle route, but now your inside receiver is going to run what I call a POCO, post corner. So that safety's got him on the corner, right? Give him a hard 2 steps to the post. and then break to the corner. And I love that concept. We called the actual play, we call cruise. But the passing concept, I mean, the route concept, I call China because the corner was involved. And so there was
Well, Coach, I will tell you this much. I could do this the rest of the day and into the night. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us. I learned a ton. I took a ton of notes. Definitely try to get you on again sometime, Coach, because I felt like I was sitting under the learning tree. So I really, really appreciate you spending some time with us. And we'll be back again for another Blue and Gold Gridiron Show soon, folks. But please, again, like and subscribe. Get all sorts of free content and information. And thanks again to Coach Chip for joining us. And I hope everybody has a great night. We'll see you next time.